We are in a time when, thanks to the coronavirus, primary elections have largely been postponed or at least radically changed, and we still don't know exactly what we can expect between now and the national election. Will we see a massive rise in vote by mail, a delay of the election? These are all things that people are worried about, that I am worried about, and so we've decided to bring on an expert to talk about these topics, as well as a recent article that he wrote. And so we are joined once again by author and campaigns manager for Equal Citizens, Adam Eichen. Welcome back to the Damage Report.
Thanks for having me again, John.
Very glad to have you on. And so, look, I've been reading your recent work, and among other things, you've been talking about sort of what role the media can play in making sure that we move in the right direction for elections and that people stay up to date with the knowledge that they need to know. So, what are some of the things that you think that the media should be doing?
Well, there's no question that we're going to be moving to elections where significantly more people will be voting by mail. That's pretty much a fact. I mean, whether it's in the upcoming primaries or in the general election, it seems like even if hopefully the coronavirus pandemic lessens during that time and there's less of a public health risk, I don't think people are going to be super eager to be voting in person. And so, a lot of states are currently moving their laws to ease absentee ballot requirements, which is a really great step. Not all states, but a lot of states are moving in the right direction. And so one of the good thing, again, is that states are acting. A potential bad thing is that election laws are changing so quickly, it's very difficult for people to keep up with what's happening. Yeah. And that's why it's so critical that the fourth estate, the ones who are surveying all this information, are providing citizens with the necessary up-to-date information, both as quickly and in a consistent fashion through the course of the election, so that they know what to do when it comes to actually casting a ballot, but not only casting a ballot, but actually requesting an absentee ballot, how to register to vote, what the registration deadlines are for registering to vote. There's a whole slew of things that are going to be, normally done by third parties or other organizations that, is going to be disrupted by the coronavirus. And so it's ever more important now that the media play a role.
Well, and we want to reassure people that we are going to be linking in the description of this video a link to vote.org, where you can find out, among other things, voting procedures for each state. You can find out absentee ballot procedures, check your registration, find out about different deadlines, including for registration, find out if your state offers online registration, how to submit your ballot, these sorts of things. But you also have talked about one way that newspapers can play an important role in this process going forward, too.
Right. And so this is such a, I think, brilliant idea. And it was spurred by the actions of a small paper in upstate New York, the Ithaca Times, in 2018. Kentucky law professor and I, Josh Douglas and I, wrote an article for the Washington Post in 2018 calling on states to, or newspapers in states across the country, to, on their front page, print a full voter registration form that any recipient could cut out, fill out, and send to the Board of Elections where applicable. We would love to see this idea spread now, especially. Josh Douglas and I wrote this article in Talking Points Memo arguing the same thing, that newspapers right now can do that. One of the scary things, John, is that most people are registered, in normal times, registered to vote through the DMV or through voter registration drives by the League of Women Voters, for example. These things can't happen right now. And so there's going to be a huge registration crisis unless we figure out creative ways to get people registration forms. And so newspapers, have access to, sending people things directly to their homes. States aren't going to mail out registration forms because that's one thing states could do, right? A great idea is that, the state of Massachusetts could send out a registration form to every unregistered voter. They could do that. The federal government could do that. But until they do, why not have newspapers send out registration forms with their weekly, their Sunday edition? And that way, when people open up the newspaper, they see a registration form and they say, oh, I'm not registered. I should register to vote. Yeah. Or it's printed on the front page, or, there's so many different creative ways. And I have to say, just in addition to this, it's not just the registration form. As I said, it's also the maybe they don't send an absentee request form, but they certainly tell readers and subscribers, and it's not just newspapers, it can be online media outlets as well, and they provide a link to this, but some sort of information about what the deadline to request an absentee ballot is and how to request an absentee ballot. And this is critical, John, Not only that, but what are the best practices to make sure that your absentee ballot is accepted once you submit it? Because as we know from 2018, there are a lot of states that are pretty regressive in terms of the how they disenfranchise voters
Yeah.
once they actually cast an absentee ballot. And so this is all something within the purview of media organizations. And I should say, and maybe this may be controversial, but cable news and even local television news programs have to step up as well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's no reason why they can't bring on experts to talk about how to request an absentee ballot, why it's so critical, and to send people, as you're doing, which is, I think, really commendable, to a place like vote.org, where they have compiled all of the necessary information to participate in elections in the age of COVID.
And it seems like a great idea, and it seems obviously important that, especially considering a lot of the uncertainty that's out there, that people have this information now. But as you point out, our concerns around a number of different aspects of the voting process, registration, absentee ballots, all of that, didn't start with coronavirus. So it would be nice if we could also use this opportunity to fix some of the problems that we had going into this crisis, and I think that a lot of your advice would help in that. So one other thing that I want to talk about too, though, is clearly the most important thing is making sure that people can actually vote without exposing themselves to coronavirus, and their vote can be counted. But we are also concerned about the perceived legitimacy of the election. And I'm curious, if we follow some of the advice that you and others have suggested, if we don't, what are your overall level of confidence of whether there will be a sense of legitimacy in the end for a national election that might occur during a pandemic like this?
Well, I think the first part of the any sort of response is that it's not too late to act to ensure an election that is safe with maximum participation. Congress could act right now. The Democrats could hold a red line that says no future stimulus money without strong protections for our democracy. That means, the Brennan Center for Justice, for example, estimate that at least $2 billion is needed to make sure that our elections are crisis proof. Congress must allocate that money. It's really not a question of if. They must do that. And as well as ensuring things with a mandate of early voting, no excuse absentee balloting, online voter registration, the list goes on. We know exactly what to do. And where Congress doesn't act, states have to act, right? If Congress doesn't step up, then we have to be pushing our state officials to pass the necessary reforms to hold an election. But again, we know what to do, John. I mean, this is the almost frustrating part. We know that we need to expand no excuse absentee balloting. We know there needs to be a robust early vote period, because here's the thing: we can't just have an all mailing ballot, because we know that that's going to disenfranchise certain communities. Yeah. So we have to have limited in-person voting too, with strong early voting. And so these are things that we have to push we have to push our state lawmakers to act. And if we do that, our elections can proceed. It'll be disrupted, but we can hold a strong election. And if we don't, look no further than Wisconsin a couple weeks ago. Yeah. We can see what happens when we don't adequately prepare. And there's not necessarily, the actors, the state, the election clerks weren't acting nefariously when they weren't able to get some of the absentee, ballots out. It's just they were completely overworked, because what they didn't do is they didn't prepare enough. So that, when the number of people requesting absentee ballots, exponentially grew, they just didn't have the capacity to do it. And so the key thing is, I know it's so hard given all of the awful things going on, but just because the elections are a couple months away doesn't mean we can put this, kick the can down the road. We have to start preparing now. Yeah. That's why Congress, the Democrats in Congress, have to hold firm when it comes to no stimulus without strong election protections, because you're right that ultimately we don't want to be in a situation where the legitimacy of the November election is called into question, because that's preventable. That's totally preventable if we act now. And so it's up to all of us, both in the media, activists on the ground, and just ordinary citizens, to make sure we actually push Congress and hold Democrats to the fire to say, you've got to hold firm on this. And of course, Republicans too.
Exactly. And the pressure needs to be put on them to do the right thing, because many of the reforms that you've talked about, they have already come out strongly against, and Donald Trump seems predisposed against them, but that doesn't mean that they can't be pushed. And you're right to point out that, like, Wisconsin, maybe they can plead a little bit of, ignorance, or the coronavirus was new enough that they couldn't adapt quickly, but nationally that excuse is not acceptable. We have literally months to go. These changes are big, they're going to require a lot of effort and a lot of money, but we have more than enough time, and if we value our democracy, we can 100% get it done. And so, thank you for continuing to advocate for some of these changes that are so needed. And we appreciate the work that you continue to do. And everyone at home, by the way, again, the link in the description to vote.org, much of the information that you need to know will be there, but continue to stay invested in this entire thing. And Adam, thank you again.
Thanks.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.